What's wrong with you people?
Welcome to Not Another Baptist Podcast. My name is Matt Hensley, the pastor of Plymouth Park Baptist Church in Irving, Texas, and I am joined by Dr. Kyle Non-Alcoholic Bierman, the rural specialist for the North American Mission Board's Replant team. Kyle, first of all, how are you?
And I am great. We're wrapping up a week, and it's been good. And I got a couple more, or I have another week before I hit the road on a very busy fall schedule. So I'm enjoying this kind of downtime before the fall kicks off.
Nice.
In a hurry.
Well, life here is...
And I'm enjoying the Olympics. Are you? Have you watched any of the Olympics?
No.
Okay. I was going to ask you, like, of all the Summer Olympics, which one are you qualified to do? Which one would you?
Shooting.
Shooting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to try my hand at handball. It looks like a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, shooting. That's it.
Okay.
I have a
out
lot of the energy of that guy that just is like standing there, the turkey dude that you know is probably like, he's got some experience.
Yeah.
Maybe not in sporting events, but he has some experience, if you know what I mean. And there's a lot of that kind of energy in my shooting. I like some of the memes that came out of like all of the other people that were competing against him with all these like, not binoculars, but like lenses in front of their glasses and all of this kind of stuff. And standing all funny, and homeboy just...
He's got his left hand in his pocket, and he's just shooting. Like, it's phenomenal.
Hey, guys, you want to go to Burger King when we're done?
Yeah, that's right.
But anyway, today I made it to like question 9 of a 159-part questionnaire of my personal history to become a chaplain for the Irving Police Department. Unpaid position, volunteer position that they are very thorough with their background check. And Kyle, I'm going to end this little story with a question for you, because one of those, I was having to recount my job history.
Okay.
And we're talking all the way to the beginning. And that includes even volunteer opportunities.
Wow.
Like, I was a soccer coach briefly for the YMCA in Grand Prairie, things like that. Well, I started with, thankfully, I keep a lot of that kind of stuff on LinkedIn. So I was able to find most of it there. Some that I didn't. I remembered I was a kind of a stalker and a boot shiner at the Army and Navy warehouse.
A stalker, not a stalker. Those are very different things. Stalker.
And for a summer when I was 14. And then I think you know the story of me working half a day at Six Flags.
Indeed.
Before I rage quit after getting my half off at Gator McGee's. And anyway, the best one, though, is they ask if you ever faced disciplinary action.
Mm.
And
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that you have at some point on multiple jobs faced some sort of disciplinary action.
Yes.
Okay.
And so this one was at Palace of Wax. I had interviewed at Palace of Wax to be a security guard. That's what the job title was called. What it was a glorified door cleaner, baby. You just went around the whole place.
I mean, I've seen that at the museum. I know how that ends.
Oh yeah. And but anyway, if you've ever been Grand Prairie, I don't know about the other ones, but if you go to the one in Grand Prairie, there is the Life of Jesus part of the exhibit. And it starts with him as a child teaching, and then him, teaching disciples or feeding the multitude. I don't remember all of the scenes, but it does have the Last Supper. And the Last Supper, before you get to the crucifixion in the empty tomb, and you can see through his hands and all of that kind of stuff in the resurrection. But in the Last Supper, it's a little cold, it's dark, it's quiet, somber music in the background, and there are some pews. One of my jobs was to get rid of any gum that was placed anywhere, and there was always gum under the pews. Homeboy got under one of those pews, sprayed his little freeze stuff to get that stuff off. It was quiet. It was cold. I went to sleep. And I faced disciplinary action.
Yeah.
Anyway,
ironically, that's not the only story of disciplinary action over a Lord's Supper depiction that we've heard about in the last week. So there you go.
But we're not going to delve into that, are we?
We are not.
You like your job, don't you?
I do.
Because I will gladly start the conversation if you want. Do you want to?
No, instead, we are talking about 7 ways to practice humility in your leadership.
One way to be humbled is to fall asleep at the Last Supper. Anyway, Ephesians 4:1-2 says, I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk, not sleep, in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility. Humility is a key for pastors, certainly as we are striving to lead churches. And y'all recently on the NAM Replant blog ran this article from Mark Halleck, And there are a few ways, 7 strategies that can help us really practice humility as leaders in the churches that God has called us to serve. And number 1, sometimes hard for those of us in replant settings, revitalization settings, don't do everything.
Ooh, yeah.
Don't do everything.
Yeah.
Mark says this is obvious, but it needs to be said. You will burn yourself out and stifle the gifts of others if you try to do everything. So, number 1, Pastor, don't do everything. Kyle, you want to tee off on that?
Yeah. So let's be honest. All right. Sometimes pastors will say, "Well, I have to do it because there's no one else." I have 2 responses to that. First of all, that might be true for a period. We've talked about this before. One of our replanter characteristics is called a resourceful generalist, meaning you need to develop the skills, you need to get the knowledge to do whatever needs to be done. But that doesn't mean you do it for always.
Yeah.
You need to learn how to delegate things, right? So maybe that's true for a time. But if you've been in a church for 2 or 3 years and you still are doing everything, and you're saying, "Man, I don't have anybody that'll help me," that is at least partially on you as the leader.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think sometimes pastors will complain about this, but I think they secretly enjoy being the one who knows how to do everything.
Yep.
And so,
Irreplaceable.
yes, I am irreplaceable, and you are not. Okay, here's a harsh truth. If
We find that out at the
tomorrow,
Palace of Wax, baby.
yeah, that's right. If tomorrow, you are hit by a bus and you are no longer with us, your church will mourn, but they will find another pastor. You are replaceable. All of us in whatever roles we are in are interims in that, because you will be there for a time and then you will no longer be here. James says that your life is like a vapor. You're here one moment, you're gone the next. You are replaceable. So do not think so highly of yourself that you feel like you have to do everything, or that your people need you to do everything. They absolutely do not.
And that leads us to number 2,
Yep.
intentionally develop other leaders.
Yeah.
If you find yourself doing a lot of the stuff around the church, and obviously there's going to be seasons, especially early on, where maybe there's a number of hats that you have to wear. We've talked about this a lot on the show. Be intentional about passing that ministry on to other people, and that's going to take developing other leaders. And as Mark says, we are called in Ephesians 4 to equip the saints for the work of ministry. That doesn't mean we are to only do the work of ministry ourselves. And so that takes intentionality and strategic ministry and leadership development in our churches to really create kind of that family approach, a teamwork approach that says, hey, we together need to make this happen. Cal, do you have anything to add? That's very similar to number 1.
Yeah, it is. That like you said, that piggybacks right off of number 1. Again, this is you need to be self-confident enough that you can develop other leaders without feeling threatened in your own ministry. And also you need to share the load of ministry with other leaders, and that requires developing them.
Yeah. Number tres, don't be afraid to ask for outside help. Phone a friend, baby. Like, hey, you realize you come into a situation that you want to figure it out. You want to know what to do. Leader feel like he has to have all the answers, all of that kind of stuff. You don't. Have a network, have some battle buddies, people that you can ask when you come to maybe a building question or a finance question or something that's outside of your purview. Be quick to reach out to your local association DOM or your state convention area rep, or if you're doing revitalization and you're in Texas, there's options that you can reach out to. Some of the revitalization guys for the 2 different conventions. Your convention probably has somebody, a growth, church growth guy or revitalization guy that you can reach out to. You can reach out to the replant team.
Absolutely.
That's why they're there. That's why we
we're here.
give to the CP, is so that Kyle can answer your questions.
That's right. Since I don't ask them very well, I can answer them.
Yeah,
there you go.
Very true.
There you go.
Ask for help. And then number 4, this one's interesting, Kyle. What's your thoughts on it? Pray the Lord won't give you, quote, success until you don't want it anymore.
Ooh.
Go ahead,
That's
Kyle.
good. Yeah, so I think what Mark is getting at here is in ministry, it can be very easy to find your identity in numbers, right? We have this many people showing up on Sunday morning. We have a budget of X amount of dollars. We have so many people on our staff. It can be real easy to get your identity in ministry from those numbers and allow that to kind of drive you. The problem is, if your identity is in those things, as long as those numbers are trending in the right direction, everything will be good. When they don't, whether it's in your power or not, right? I mean, we're 4 years out from COVID, which wrecked numbers for almost everybody at some point or another, right? That was completely outside of your control. But here's the thing, like if that's where you find your identity, and suddenly you have a family who has to leave and move to another town because of a job situation, or maybe they have a family situation that occurs, even though they're not leaving their church because they're angry with you, you're going to take that personally and take that as a personal affront because they're no longer a part of this ministry, right? And here's the thing, when you want success, when you find your identity in success, then suddenly the people that you're supposed to be ministering to end up being people that you're using to build that part of your identity. And that's not the way ministry is designed to happen.
When you use them just to springboard into or onto
Yeah.
something else, something bigger and better, because that's you've ultimately just used them to platform and spring yourself onto something else, up to something else, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and you touched on something that reminded me during COVID of the realization that we almost universally came to, that we thought all of us had suddenly become these like televangelists because our Facebook views
Yeah.
were
Look at my Facebook numbers. Yeah.
and then you go into the actual like stats and realize that, oh, you might have had 500 views, but 496 of those were 3-second views.
Yes, that's right. Nobody cared to see you.
Yeah. Oh man. So number 5, grow in and practice self-awareness.
Ooh,
Right? Know how you're gifted. Know how you're not. Different
Yeah.
people have different gifts, right? We've been gifted in different ways, different opportunities that we have. This is a good and beautiful thing. We're not all a bunch of clones out there. And so be honest
Yeah.
about your strengths and weaknesses and surround yourself with those who complement your gifting. And I think that leads to number 6, share the pulpit. He
Yeah.
said a bunch,
A
a lot of
bunch.
times.
Yeah.
I'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So again, as you share the pulpit, that's going to help you raise up leaders, which we talked about earlier. That can help you prepare families to send out as ministers, as pastors in other churches, which can be part of that success that you're not trying to chase, but the Lord could have a whole different definition of what success looks like. And again, I mean, it is a good thing to share leadership. It is a good thing to raise up leaders. In fact, the Bible, I think, would say that is a natural part of discipleship, right? Is raising up leaders, and then certainly, as we see throughout the book of Acts, sending those leaders out, not just to serve always and forever in your local church, but to go serve in other churches. And let me tell you, all over North America, we have churches that are in need of pastors, that are in need of families who can go and serve well. And it just might be God's calling your church not to grow huge numerically in your location, but to be a sending agency that's raising people up and sending them out in your community, across your state, maybe even around the world, to take the gospel to the ends of the earth.
Yep.
And one of the reasons you find that out is by sharing the pulpit, allowing young men, allowing old men to preach the word, and to see how God surprises you with some of the gifts that you have in your congregation.
Yep. And I want to add to this that don't just do it on those 2 Sundays that you have off or the 4 Sundays that you have off.
Yes.
One of the best things you do as a pastor is, even if you're not the worship pastor or whatever on the stage leading the music, obviously some of our guys that are listening
Sure.
have to do
Yeah.
that as well. But even if you're not, you are the lead worship pastor. You are the one that is leading the worship of your church. And one of the best things you can do as the pastor is, hey, you bring that associate pastor, the youth pastor up to preach, whatever it might be, sit on that front row, take
Yep.
notes, engage with the sermon. Amen. Be a part of it. Because 1, you're celebrating him. That's going to lead
Yep.
to number 7. But
And
you're
real
also
quick, let
modeling-
me give this. This is a ministry hack. Okay, if you can share the pulpit 4 or 5 times a year, in addition to whatever vacation time you have, here's a great thing. That is going to free you up during that week to focus on some other tasks.
Yeah.
Maybe to get ahead on your preaching calendar for a few weeks ahead. Maybe to spend a little bit more time visiting and shepherding your people, because you're not having to prepare a sermon for that Sunday. And so you are killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You are raising up leaders, giving them the opportunity to preach, and you're creating a little bit of margin in your own life, where you don't get a Sunday off. But Matt, you know this, if there's a Sunday, even when you're at the church, but you're not preaching, it's just a different feel. I mean, it changes the whole rhythm of the Sunday morning.
Yep.
And that is a ministry hack for you. If you can do this, you will free up some time in your pastoral ministry to focus on some other areas on those weeks.
All right, number 7, extravagantly encourage those you lead.
Yeah.
Remember the volunteers, encourage those that are serving. Be the Barnabas, be the guys that is encouraging everybody around you, because you can't do it without them. But as Paul said, therefore encourage one another and build one another up in 1
Yep.
Thessalonians 5:11. Encouraging others extravagantly is a powerful weapon in the fight against pride and the desire to be gloried in. And so, hey, and especially if somebody comes to you and says, hey, great blank, whatever it was, and there was anybody else involved in that, hey, it was so much fun, we could not have done it without blank. Be real quick to encourage somebody else. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say this is something that Mark Halleck, who wrote this article, this is something that he embodies. He is an encourager, and I would really encourage you to check out his little book called The Relentless Encourager, to become that person that is always seeking to build each other up, that is seeking to encourage those around you, because that will feed into everything else that we've talked about. Being able to share your pulpit, developing other leaders. If you are an encourager, people will be drawn to that, to have you help build them up in leadership.
Awesome. Well, Pastor, be humble, or God's going to humble you. So until next time, may your coffee be as black as night and as bold as the gospel we declare. Take care. Have a good one.
What's wrong with you people?